Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here today, and I'm going to be covering how to smoke a brisket in this video. If you need to know how to set up your grill for such an event, I have both gas and charcoal grill videos posted. And first step is I like to dry off the meat. Just makes it turn out much better. And what we're looking at here is usually brisket comes in kind of 3 layers. You have a real thick fat layer, which some of it's been cut off here, which is kind of unfortunate. Then you have a layer that kind of runs, it has a fat line separating it, and this is like real large grain meat here. And usually that's what I turn into chop. And then this top layer here, I call it the top layer, it might actually be the bottom layer, is a real fine grain, and that's what I like to turn into the sliced brisket. And unless you get a really small brisket, so you can kind of see that seam here, unless you get a really small brisket, they're going to have these 3 pieces. If you get a really small brisket, usually it's just this top layer here of the real fine that you'll want to turn into your sliced pieces of brisket. And then for trimming, I just like to take some of this extra fat off, like right here. And you could leave it on there, I guess. But there's really no point in it. It's not going to do anything to make your brisket taste better. It's just a huge glob of fat. And it won't even like liquefy like when you cook a steak. Now, if you were hunting deer and making your own burgers, this would probably be a good fat to keep to grind up into those burgers to help them stick together. But we're a long way from deer season right now, so I will not be keeping any of that. And then I just go through and usually try to take off any fat here on the surface. And as I've said in past videos, sharp knife is definitely a must for this. And I like using these Wusthoffs. And once you get it started, there should be a membrane in there that you can just kind of peel back on the fat and slice along it to separate it from the meat without taking any meat off, really. Now the thick layer of fat on the bottom, I'm going to leave that, and there's a big debate of whether you do fat up on top, which supposedly will a whole bunch of moisture will be created by the fat and then it'll drain down through the meat. If that sounds impossible or unlikely, I agree with you. I don't think that's what happens. So I like to put that big chunk of fat on the bottom. And what it's going to do down there is absorb some of that heat, so you'll get a little bit more even cook because it's spreading the heat out over the surface. But then also, you're not quite getting as high or as a direct heat because of the fat layer. So it's protecting the meat from overcooking. And I feel like it helps you get a more even cook. Having it on the bottom. So I'm in the fat on the bottom camp. Okay, so that's all trimmed up and it's all dried. So next step is to put your favorite rub on it and then take it out and slap it on your smoking setup, whether it's gas or charcoal grill. And basically you want to weigh this and then cook an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half for each pound. If I remember right, this one is somewhere around 4 1/4 pounds, so I'll be cooking it for roughly, I think it was 5 to 6 hours if I remember correctly. And basically on temp you're looking to hit 190 degrees. Once it hits that, you want to pull it off, wrap it in like 2 to 4 layers of aluminum foil and stick it inside of a cooler and basically let it rest for 2 to 4 hours. Just note, when you take that aluminum foil off, there will be a lot of juice that has come out. Some of that's reabsorbed as the meat sits there and rests, but you'll want to do it on top of a tray or something to keep your countertops clean. And you could save that juice if you wanted to, especially for your chop portion. But basically you pull that off the aluminum then and then slice it up and serve it. And the first step that we'll get to when we do that is we'll separate the two halves of it. So we'll go throw this on the grill real quick, and definitely on this I use the 9-hour fire for the charcoal grill. That way I don't have to continually open it up and check on this thing. It should just sit in there, leave the lid closed. Every time you open the lid to look at stuff, you're messing up the cooking process because you're jacking with the temperature and the humidity that is occurring during the grill. So maybe you could open once, but don't open it a whole bunch like you do with the ribs. So let's go put this on the grill. So here you can see more of a 9-hour fire versus what I used on the ribs, which ended up being more of like a short-term fire that you have to continuously tend. And then the process is the same. You'll want to stick either some chips that have been soaked in water on top or some of these blocks. And the chunks, because of their size, do not have to be soaked in water. Although soaking them in water probably does create more smoke than normal. And I'm putting mesquite on there. Normally for brisket I like to use hickory or oak. Of course I like using hickory on just about everything. Turkey, chicken, ribs. I think it has the strongest and best flavor and more of what people are expecting out of barbecue. Now we just need to put on our brisket and cover it up and get the dampener set at the right location to maintain that 250 degree temperature. So there's the brisket, and then we're going to put this on with the dampener over the meat side to try to draw that smoke across the meat. And we just monitor the temperature, adjust the dampeners for about the first half an hour until it sets into a steady state temp, and then from there we just leave it until cook time's done. About 3 hours in, since this is about a 4.5 hour cook, 5 hour cook, I'll probably check it at about 3 hours, make sure it's cooking right, check the temperature, make sure it didn't end up cooking too fast. And other than that, you really don't want to mess with this at all. So on a larger brisket, you're looking at 10 to 15 hours. So usually I start these like the night before and go to bed and then wake up in the morning, check on them, And if they're doing great, I just leave it alone and let it continue to cook until it's time to pull it off, chop it up, and eat it for lunch. Okay, so we're going to check on the meat. It's been almost 4 hours. The temperature is hovering right around 225. And the fire's burned down quite a bit. It's still going, but I might add some extra charcoal to it. And basically you want the temp to hit 190 in the thickest part of the meat. So we're about 40 degrees off of that right now. I'm probably going to, well, I'll add a couple more chunks of wood just to make sure it stays smoking. And then other than that, we'll put the lid back on it and let it cook for about another hour. Probably should do it. Okay, so the brisket's been on here for about 6 hours. I checked the temp and we're up to that 190 that we're looking for. So this is ready to pull off. And then what you do is you take it in, wrap it in 2 layers of aluminum foil, and put it in a cooler and keep it pretty much warm and let it rest. And then after that's done, you'll take it out and I'll show you how to cut it up. Okay, now that that's rest, it's time to cut it up. Remember I said the top portion gets sliced and the bottom portion gets turned into chop. And you can just barely see that seam right here that we need to cut along. So this piece is your sliced, and you just kind of go across the grain and slice it up. And if you have a meat slicer, you can use that. You want to create fairly thin slices. But I am going to get out a cutting board at least, so I'm not making my knife dull slicing into this plate. So that's how you slice that. You can see I've got a pretty good bark going on. I've got a smoke ring there. It's even penetrated up from the bottom, even though there was this other piece of meat covering it. And that's how you do your sliced. For your chopped, you're going to want to get this meat get the fat trimmed off of it. There's a pretty good portion of fat here that we don't want. Remember, we left that on there to protect the meat during the smoking process. And once you have that off, you're just going to chop this up as finely as possible. And this side of the brisket has a bit more fat and connecting tissue in it. So basically I cube it up like that and then just go back and start slicing it even smaller. You could also grab a fork and shred it, but chopped is fine. And this would be like mixed in with some sauce and used in a sandwich, where this is usually served just in slices. You could also put the slices on the sandwich. But that's basically how you chop up your brisket. It'll take me a while to get through the rest of this, so I'll end the video here. Hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the thumbs up button if you did. Leave a comment if you have a question or something that you think I did wrong. And please subscribe, and thanks for watching.